In the dark heart of 16th century Germany, an indescribable evil crept through the fields and forests around Bedburg. People vanished without a trace, and bodies were found torn apart, as if by invisible claws. At night, villagers swore they heard howls unlike any known animal. There was something there, something too dreadful to name aloud without trembling. A secret whispered between prayers and supplications, a name too feared ever to be spoken. The horror had taken on human form, or almost. But what lay behind the most terrifying legend of the Middle Ages? What creature could unite the traits of man and beast, of sin and curse? In this journey, we shall descend into the depths of madness, corrupt faith, and an insatiable hunger. It was the year 1582 when the fields surrounding the village of Bedburg in the Cologne region became the stage for a terror that neither church nor peasant could comprehend. The bucolic landscape, marked by creaking windmills, dense woodland, and cold stone churches, hid a darkness beneath its charm. Pasture animals began to vanish. Sheep were discovered with their entrails exposed, as though something or someone delighted in tearing them apart. It was not long before the first human bodies appeared, many reduced to fragments, their flesh bearing bite marks that were neither human nor those of any local wolf. Families bolted their doors at dusk, reinforcing crosses in their windows, as if expecting a demonic visitation. Children were forbidden to wander alone, and the silence over the streets was as thick as the mist rising from the forest. Something was terribly amiss, an evil that the land itself seemed to reject, a reek of blood mixed with brimstone, as though hell itself had cracked open beneath the feet of Bedburg's inhabitants. Local legends had long told of creatures haunting the forest, ancient spirits, beasts with torn skin and glowing eyes. But what now ravaged the village went beyond folklore. It was real, visceral, lethal. Rumors spread of a figure that walked as a man by day, but transformed by night into something more akin to a lupine aberration. Some claimed to have seen a silhouette skittering across the fields on malformed limbs, hands turning to claws and the mouth stretching into a beast-like muzzle. Powerless and terrified, the local church organized armed patrols, while priests delivered fiery sermons on sin, witchcraft, and pacts with the devil. In those days, faith offered both consolation and condemnation. Those deemed different, the recluses, the eccentrics, were watched with growing suspicion. Fear spread like an invisible plague, corroding reason and fueling collective hysteria. It was in this febrile atmosphere that the name Peter Stump began to echo through hushed alleys. A widower with a young daughter and a dubious reputation, Stump was known to live in isolation near the hills where attacks were most frequent. Some whispered that he spoke to himself on full moon nights, that animals followed him as if he were one of their own, and that he never confessed, even under threat. Others swore they'd seen him emerge from the wood stained with blood, claiming to have been hunting foxes. But they said the scent was unmistakable, not of beast, but of human flesh. As panic reached its zenith, the villagers demanded answers. The beast must be captured, the horror-named order restored. Hunts were organized, traps laid, priests summoned for mass exorcisms. Then, on a rain-soaked night, as the screams of yet another victim echoed through the trees, a band of armed men chased a shadow until it stumbled, fell, and lay there. Not as a creature, but as a man. Peter Stump, filthy, breathless, and drenched in blood. What began as a simple accusation soon deepened into something far more profound and terrifying. Under torture, Stump's confessions would reveal not only horrific crimes, but a descent into the very darkness of the human soul, and perhaps the truth that evil may wear 1,000 faces, some hidden within ourselves. After his capture, Peter Stump was dragged through Bedburg's mud-choked streets beneath the wary, horrified gazes of the townsfolk. His figure, once that of a solitary peasant, became the focus of a communal nightmare. Chained and imprisoned in a dank cell beneath a religious building, he was to endure one of the most brutal and infamous trials ever recorded in medieval Europe. His accusers were certain Stump was the beast that had haunted the village, but the truth had to be extracted, even if it meant tearing it from him with searing iron. In those days, the courtroom was both a ceremony of blood and a theater of faith, flames ablaze before a single verdict was declared. The church, allied with local lords, viewed Stump not merely as a criminal, but as a symbol of satanic corruption threatening divine order. When the first torture device bit into his flesh, Peter began to speak, not in tears or denials, but with a somber conviction that froze the blood. He claimed that from his youth he had dabbled in the occult. One night, in a moment of desperation, a hooded figure, whom he identified as the devil himself, had appeared to him in the fields, offering power in exchange for submission. Stump described with chilling clarity a black leather belt bestowed by the demon, which, when worn, turned him into a ravenous wolf with dagger-sharp fangs and the strength to rend men limb from limb. It was not only the physical transformation that terrified him, but the insatiable hunger that possessed him. He confessed to murdering more than a dozen people, men, women, and children alike. He recounted how he ambushed lone travelers, tore their bodies apart with his bare hands, and bathed himself in their blood. He even admitted to devouring parts of their flesh, claiming that human meat had the taste of redemption and damnation intertwined. To his torturers and judges, Stump's words were gospel. He went on to reveal even more profane deeds: incest with his own daughter, carnal relations with a demonic woman-shaped creature, and participation in moonlit invocation rituals. The grotesque vividness of his confessions blurred the line between delirium and reality. Had he truly committed such deeds, or had his mind snapped under the instruments of torment? The court, of course, cared little for the veracity. Every utterance of Peter Stump was recorded as absolute truth. The beast had been unmasked, and his existence confirmed every religious warning. The world was under constant assault by infernal forces, and any moral lapse could open the gates to perdition. His confession became both spectacle and cautionary tale, fanning paranoia and justifying brutal repression of suspected heretics. On the day of his sentence, the church bells tolled thrice, not in celebration of justice, but to herald a public sacrifice. Peter Stump was to be executed in the most exemplary fashion, so that his blood might cleanse the community's sins and his agony serve as an everlasting warning. He would not die a man, nor a wolf. His punishment was orchestrated to strip away every trace of humanity or monstrosity. Yet before the flames claimed him, one final act of horror was to be enacted. His torture was to follow a precise ritual, ensuring he would never return, neither as man nor beast. And contrary to what many believed, Stump's death did not end the terror. It merely sealed it within the collective imagination. On 31st October 1589, Bedburg's central square became an altar of agony. Peter Stump's execution was to be the cruelest, most theatrical spectacle the land had ever seen. The pyre stood ready, but first there would be a ritual of suffering, not merely to punish but to purify. Villagers, nobles, and clergy crowded the wooden scaffold, whispering prayers and murmuring exclamations of anticipation. They yearned to witness the monster's demise, convinced that by destroying his body, they would annihilate the evil that stalked their nights. Stump was strapped to a torture wheel, his limbs stretched as though drawn between two invisible forces. With iron hammers, the executioners crushed his arms and legs at 12 separate points, disfiguring him slowly, bone by bone. Each crack was accompanied by a roar, not of a beast, but of a man, a cruel reminder that however monstrous his acts, there remained a shred of humanity within. After the initial torture, his limbs were torn away with iron hooks. Then, still alive, the flesh of his chest and back was stripped in long strips. Finally, before the pyre's flames, his head was severed with a single axe blow. His daughter, accused of incest, and his mistress, deemed complicit in his satanic crimes, were strangled and burnt alongside him. It was both a purge and a public exorcism, a terrifying pageant that left an indelible wound upon the village's soul. Stump's remains were displayed for days, his quartered body mounted on an elevated wheel, his head impaled beside a stuffed wolf, an obscene fusion of the two worlds he was said to inhabit, human and bestial. Above them hung a Latin placard that read, "This is the end of one who makes a pact with the devil." Yet in the days that followed, strange things occurred. Though the nights were silent, they felt heavier. Some villagers claimed they still heard distant howls from the woods, even after the execution. Others reported glimpsing a shadowed figure on the roadside, half man, half beast, watching in silence. It seemed the creature's essence had not been banished, but set free. The legend of Peter Stump spread swiftly across Germany and beyond, becoming emblematic of medieval dread. He was dubbed the Werewolf of Bedburg, and his tale endured as one of Europe's earliest and most detailed recorded lycanthropy cases. Modern scholars debate whether it was merely an Inquisition pretext to eliminate an inconvenient man, or if Stump was indeed a psychopath who sheltered in the deluge. Yet some whisper, eyes distant and voices hushed, that certain curses outlive death. That on full moon nights, the winds of Bedburg still murmur his name. That the forest, silent and impenetrable, hides hungry eyes. And that, from time to time, someone disappears as if the hunger never died. The case of Peter Stump was more than a medieval tragedy. It was the birth of an archetype, a somber warning, an echo of our deepest fear, what we might become if, in losing our humanity, we awaken the beast that slumbers beneath our skin. The story of Peter Stump remains shrouded in mists of horror and doubt, an ancestral scar etched into Europe's collective imagination. Was he truly a man who turned into a wolf, or simply a monster born of madness, fanaticism, and institutional violence? Perhaps we shall never know. But what renders this case so haunting is its very ambiguity, the fine line between reality and legend, between human evil and the supernatural. His confession, torn from him amidst blood and screams, bears the echoes of a ruined man and the whispers of something beyond flesh. The public execution, the vivid accounts of his atrocities, the magic belt, the demonic pacts, all form a mosaic of symbolic terror transcending time. For many, Stump became the first modern werewolf, a figure not only of physical transformation, but of total loss of humanity. He stands as a distorted mirror of our own repressed impulses, of the violence that lurks at civilization's edges. The fear he inspired endures, for it speaks to a universal unease. What if evil dwells not in the forests or the night, but within ourselves? What if the monster, as Peter claimed, lies patiently beneath our own skin, waiting for a crack in the facade to emerge? In recalling the Bedburg case, we are not merely retelling an ancient tale. We are revisiting an open wound, a dark reminder that civilization is fragile and that horror, be it mythical or human, is never as far away as we might hope.